Hey guys, this is Kevin Kane with Precision Powerlifting Systems. I'm going to kind of cover today how I feel the coaching process should work. I think as coaches what we need to understand is when somebody signs up with us, that our job is to guide their individual journey. It's not about us, and to be a good coach, you have to be very selfless. And you have to try to leave your opinions and your bias outside and kind of just give the lifter the information that they need to be able to guide their own journey. And what they're really hiring you for is for your expertise within the coaching realm. So with the programming, the technique, and of course, as things come up in the gym, the decision-making process. And that decision-making process is probably one of the more important aspects of training. And so you see on the internet a lot, and rightfully so, people always try to say how important that athlete-coach relationship is. And I agree with that. It is extremely important, but I'm going to give you the reasons why it's important and how that relationship helps guide that individual process. I think oftentimes it gets easy as a coach to try to just push your ideas and your opinions onto each lifter. So like, for example, I think we see this a lot on the internet where lifters will hit PRs, and I think the coach is definitely happy that the lifter hit a PR. But when I read some of these posts, I feel that the coach is patting themselves on the back more than they're giving the lifter credit for their work. Because as a coach, you're doing none of the fucking work. Sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet is not that hard to do. And to count number of lifts or have Excel count the number of lifts for you, because that's what a lot of the programs do nowadays. It's not necessarily, as a coach, you're not doing shit. And like, I listen to, after nationals, and I'm not trying to put anybody on blast, but if you know who I'm talking about, I don't give a fuck. But one of the best lifters on the fucking planet, hands down, shared a video of how hard that this person actually worked in training. That's why he won a national championship, and that's why he put up world record numbers, is because of that effort that he was putting in. It had nothing to do with the program, and yet everybody's on the internet saying how great the program is that he did. No, it's what he was bringing to the program. And I'm going to kind of cover why he did fucking great. And for every one of those people that do great on something like that, there's hundreds that don't. And this is the part of the process where the coach needs to guide it. It's not the program. It's not your biomechanical analysis of what the lifter's fucking doing underneath the barbell. Of course, that stuff's important, but the coaching relationship goes a lot further than that. And I think a lot of times, I'm going to give another example, is like when somebody gets dinged up in the gym, right? Their back hurts, their knee hurts, elbow, whatever it is. Every coach, whether you're a Gray Cook follower or a barbell medicine follower, everybody has their own fucking opinion on what this person should do. But the only thing that fucking matters in making this decision on what this person needs to do is, as a coach, you need to give him guidance in what the risks and rewards of each decision are. And this lifter needs to decide based off of their personal reasons for doing this sport. So if you have a world level athlete, or you have somebody with world level aspirations and they have some knee pain, well, they might have to have a little bit riskier behavior in the gym than somebody who's just doing this for fun. And each lifter needs to really identify deep within them what their purpose for doing this stuff is. And I'll get new lifters and you'll ask them what they want. And it's like, I want to be competitive in the sport of powerlifting, but yet their actions never back up their words. And most people don't really know what it takes to be ultimately a high-level competitor in any sport. And we'll do a lot of exercises where they have to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and come up with these very process-oriented reasons why they're doing this. Because I think those process-oriented reasons why are what really drive the car. And once as a coach, you understand their reasons why, you can help guide their process a lot better, right? So if I know that I have a lifter with world-level aspirations, I can be like, hey, here's the risk of doing this. Here's the reward of doing this. Or, if we pull back, like at the end of the day, if we train 4 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, it's 208 training days. You need to make the most out of each one of those in order to be a high-level athlete, right? And most people, what they'll do is they'll make excuses on given days, right? They'll come in and it'll be, well, I got a lot of stress going on in my life. Work was tough today. I feel a little dinged up, so I'm going to pull back a little bit. And it's not that these answers are wrong. It's just if you have somebody who has more of those days, If all things are considered equal, the one who's able to work harder and push through is going to be the winner at the end of the day. So making sure that that is correctly communicated to each lifter, I think, is extremely important as well. But I think what ends up happening is, so I'm stealing this. This was from a Simon Sinek, I don't even know how to say his last name, video. He was talking more about like business stuff. But I think this really applies to powerlifting, and this really applies to coaching even more. Is we have a circle, and in the center I put why, the outer ring is how, and then the outside ring here is the what. Well, I would say the what here is basically just like, I want to hit PRs. These are your very superficial external goals, right? I want to qualify for nationals. I want to do these things. Like, that's great. But those are your whats. And the how tends to be the program, right? But what really guides the program and eventually those outside results, those external results, are what's driving the individual lifter. So it's understanding their why and why they're doing this. Right? So if you have a lifter, I'm going to just use that same example. So let's say we have a lifter and they could have all the potential in the world, right? And they're like, my back hurts. And you know it's not that serious. It's just they're a little fatigued or whatever. But they have all of these fears and stuff, right? Maybe they had a back injury previously, or maybe they watched a parent suffer from back pain, whatever it may be. Maybe they have these preconceived notions of injuring their back. So they get a little stiff, they get a little sore, and now they start having that fear response. Well, if their why is to challenge themselves and to conquer their fears, right? Well, then that can shape the conversation to be like, hey, you're okay, and remember, this is our why. So when you get a little bit scared, let's challenge ourselves in a particular way in which it lines up with your why. But of course, if their why is just to have fun, right? Oh, I'm just doing this to be healthy so I can play with my grandkids, right? Or I can play with my kids in general, like whatever it may be. If it's a why that's kind of for other reasons, like you're lifting to be able to do other things, well then of course you don't want to get hurt lifting so that you can't do those other things. So that would go against the why of that individual. So with that individual, you might be a little bit more conservative with your decision making and your programming and stuff like that. But it becomes really, really important to understand the why in order to drive decision making. So as a coach, these are the things I need to learn from each lifter in order to help individualize their programs. So if the programming itself, like actually sitting in front of a computer, I probably spend less time in front of a computer now than I did before, but I spend much more time programming because it requires a lot of deep conversations. And some of the things that we'll do is we have like weekly reflections that people will send me. Like I'll pose a question or a statement or something and ask people what it means to them and have them just kind of reflect upon it all week. And there's a lot of, and what people will find is when they do this continuously, there'll be a lot of themes that repeat themselves. So when somebody first starts out, they might not know what their reason is. There's just something that's drawing them to the sport of powerlifting. And without knowing their reason, you know, you give them a program, they're going to hit some PRs. Like everybody does pretty well for the first 2 or 3 years within the sport. But when they get a setback, when they inevitably experience some pain, it's going to end up being this that they need to really understand. So starting that off, like they'll be training and stuff and just making sure you're asking these questions, having these conversations. And over time, if they're continuously putting in this work, these themes constantly start showing up. And then they're able to pull those themes and then they're starting to able to turn, and then they become able to turn it into a why. And of course the why can change over time. So when I first started powerlifting, I was just having fun. And then it became more of a job and I wanted to be a better athlete, but I'm trying to grow a coaching business at the same time. So my why as an athlete and my why as a coach just weren't lining up. So it was hard to do both and I was becoming equally frustrated on each side. It's like, well, my numbers aren't going where they should be and I'm getting frustrated with my lifters a lot easier. So what can I do to make sure that everything kind of lines up together? Because I'm one person, I'm not two people. And of course you can do this exercise for everything, but if it is a character, a process-oriented why, I really feel that like if you have a genuine purpose as a human being and you feel strongly about something, It needs to line up with all the actions of your life, right? So if I have a strong vision and a strong purpose of doing this one thing, but I constantly partake in something that's pointing me in a different direction, there's a pushing and a pulling here. Nothing lines up and there's not forward progress. So when I started like really thinking about this more deeply, I'm like, all right, well, it's really hard to be a high level athlete and a high level coach. I know that there are high level athletes that coach people, but you have a finite amount of attention. This is literally a proven scientific fact. You have a finite amount of attention. You need a surplus of attention to be a high level performer. So if I'm trying to put all of my attention into coaching, I don't have that surplus to be an athlete. It just doesn't work that way. And you have high level attention for the people who are well trained or well able to do these things for a maximum of 4 hours per day. So if I spend 4 hours a day really analyzing programs, talking with clients, reading, learning, all of those things, and then I go and try to train for 2 hours, it becomes more difficult. There's not a surplus of attention. And now you can throw some other things on top of it. Let's say I'm the type of person who doesn't sleep enough. That's going to limit my amount of attention. Say I'm the type of person who's constantly looking for things like my keys, my papers, my books.
Did you say 4 hours of finite attention?
You have of high level attention.
Oh.
You have 4 hours. And that's a well-trained person. So somebody who typically doesn't try to pay a lot of attention to things or really work on those skills, they have less. And if you don't sleep well, you have less attention. If you're constantly looking for your keys and everything else you own, you're taking attention to trying to find those things, right? And also if you're in the middle of a task and then you're trying to do those things, it becomes a major distraction. Or the phones become a major distraction and they take your attention. Literally, our attention is valuable to those marketing companies. Likes are worth money. So they need to pull your attention into it, right? So we have everybody competing for our attention. Then our social lives. We have families, we have friends. People are constantly trying to pull us in a bunch of different directions. So we live in a world where we have a finite amount of attention. Everybody's trying to take our attention, but we need a surplus to be a high-level performer, right? So it becomes really important to understand why you're doing things, to be able to overcome those people trying to grab your attention, whether it's marketers, whether it's, people who necessarily don't have the same values as you, that are part of your micro or macro environments that you spend a lot of your time in. So it's being able to really identify your values here as well, and making sure that you're spending a lot of time with people with similar values, because it's going to be very hard if you're being pushed and pulled in different directions. So for me, what I ended up coming up with is I lift as an athlete to be a better coach. So when I have opportunities in the gym, one of the things as a coach, and I think especially earlier on, you're always trying to write the perfect program. And there is no perfect program, right? Like it might work for one person, but then you'd give it to somebody else, it doesn't work, right? And ultimately, I think it's a lot of the character traits that the person brings to the program that ultimately matters the most. So I was constantly looking to have the perfect program and reading books and all of these things. But there's intellectual knowledge and there's also experiential knowledge, right? And one of the reasons why that I've always talked to people who've been in the sport a lot longer than me was to learn from them so I could learn from their experiential knowledge, their experiences within the sport. But then I realized I need to experience some of these things for myself. Even if they're not going to lead me to being a better athlete, they're going to lead me to being a better coach. And ultimately, if I'm a better coach, I think as a lifter, I'll get stronger. So when I look at the character traits that I feel are important for high levels of success, right? Like effort, resiliency, obviously consistency, commitment, intent, all of these things, I can still bring those character traits to any program that I put forth. And no matter what I'm doing in the gym, yes, maybe it doesn't yield the external outcomes that I'm looking for, but it's not going to go to waste. And it's just going to force me to make adjustments at times to get those external outcomes if that's what I want. So I decided on a couple of things. So one, I did nothing but max effort singles for a year. And what I wanted to learn from this is I wanted to really understand what it feels like in powerlifting to take a bunch of heavy singles, right? Because everybody's just always told you shouldn't do that. And yes, I agree that you shouldn't do that. And they'll give you reasons why, but experiencing it just brings a whole new perspective to to the top, right? So because of that, I'm able to program singles a lot better. I'm able to understand what people are going through. And so now we have a system just based off of my experiences. And we're able to take a lot of singles in this system because of my experiences. Another part of it was, single ply powerlifting was all that existed at one point. And I decided to get into some equipment and start feeling it out. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have a lot of experience in this equipment. And I know you probably shouldn't be in your equipment all of the time because everybody says you got to train raw, you got to train raw, you got to train raw, which of course I've still been training raw. But I was like, you know what? If I can just spend every training session in my equipment, I can learn the equipment a lot faster, which then can help me guide my lifters. And from September 2019 to now, I've been in my equipment almost every single training day. There's been a few instances where I haven't, where I've got a little banged up and just did some light raw stuff. And I do my raw stuff after my equip stuff as like my main accessory. But I've been in my equipment, so if you take 52, right, times mostly 3 training days because of COVID, but I've been in my gear 3 training days at 52 weeks a year. That's 156 times 2. So I've been in my gear over 300 times. And if you think of what the average lifter does that lifts equipped per year, maybe they get into it just for a few cycles here and there. I can make up ground that way in just learning and understanding the gear and what it feels like and the experiences with it. So that's one of the reasons why I do it. And I also enjoy it, right? So my why of being a lifter is to be a better coach. So once I lined up my why, I started enjoying training more. My lifts got better, like technique-wise and stuff like that. And the external outcomes will be there. So because I got pretty dinged up this last training block, I've hurt my back twice, my hamstring once, I traveled twice. Like there's just been a lot of stuff going on. So my volume's been down, my results haven't been super stable, but I've been able to put myself in a position where, I should have some nice little PRs. And I'm gonna make sure I'm 100% after this meet, and we'll start pushing it, getting the volume up there to where it needs to be for the next one. But I also haven't competed in a year and a half. So the fact that I have a meet on the books, I have a meet coming up, I'm gonna get in the flow of competition, it should help kind of redirect some of that stuff too. So once I got them lined up, the how and the what become very easy to kind of guide, because you run into these situations where it's, what should I do today? How should I address this weakness or this problem that I have? And that why is always gonna be there, right? So like for me, it came into, okay, so like I'll ask myself a question. How can we program more singles, right? So you get what, max effort. How can we program more singles, right? And then my why I lift, right? If I lift to be a better coach, all right, I don't really know. I might have intellectual knowledge on this, but I've never experienced it. So how can I really combine the two? I'm gonna run singles for a whole year. Like that's just a small example. But getting back to what it is for a lifter, and a lifter that you're coaching, I think the process happens in stages too. In the beginning, they need to have fun and they need to enjoy it. So you need to give them enough small wins to want to stick with the sport. And then as you're giving them these small wins, these conversations need to take place. So you need to understand who they are as people and what's really driving their decisions. Because no matter what, your why is driving your decisions. I see this a lot with lifters too. You get a lot of people who participate in powerlifting are insecure. They don't have a ton of confidence. They don't believe in themselves a lot. And this is just a great opportunity for them to build some of those skills. So you can set them up for those things. But as you're having those conversations, what they'll do too is if they really don't believe in themselves, they're the people who will constantly grab their phone during training. Because you can leave it down while you're training, but they choose not to because their ego is just self-sabotaging themselves because they really don't believe in themselves. So digging down deep and having them kind of identify some of these character traits of theirs, identifying who they are, being honest with themselves, who they are in this current moment, and start putting a plan in place to challenge those skills each and every day. This isn't just certain training days, certain ways that the program works, but setting them up in a way where they can really challenge themselves and really work on some of their character traits. And it also helps develop that athlete-coach relationship. And so I've been with a lot of my lifters now. Like Alyssa, this is her 200th week. Dave's been with me for like 250 weeks. I've been fortunate enough to have people over a long period of time. So I've seen their whys completely change. I've seen people go from sulking and throwing temper tantrums in the gym when things don't go well, to laughing and having fun when they're missing weights and not being worried about plateaus anymore, and getting promotions outside of work and just seeing their lives flourish in different ways. And it's because they're building these certain character traits. They've done the work where they have to look inside, and they've realized where they are, who they want to be, and they've put those steps into place. I think this right here, this is what coaching is. Not everybody's going to be a world champion. Very few people are ever going to achieve that. And the majority of people in front of you just, when I think of like my time in sports, I've been in sports for over 30 years, and it's giving me the skills necessary to overcome a lot of adversities in my life. It's been an outlet to those adversities at times. It's built friendships and other relationships. I think it's really important that everybody gets that experience. So on the internet, when we're arguing about whether to use RPEs or percentages or how much volume you need or any of that stuff, it's like, all right, how important is that? Where on this does that stuff lie? That stuff is important, but that's out here. If you haven't done this other stuff, it doesn't fucking matter. It starts here. You got to work from the inside out, not from the outside in. So if it's like, oh, this is what we do for programming because it's going to build the most muscle mass, or the highest frequency yields the best results in this 6-week study of 12 untrained weak men, like, that's the what. And without understanding this other things, like their why in that study might be because they're forced to do it and they're getting a few bucks. Like, it doesn't necessarily apply to the people you're coaching. And this is where culture comes from. Like this coaching aspect builds a certain culture. Like if you know your why, nothing else fucking matters. Like if somebody doesn't agree with what you're doing in the gym, you don't care because you're not doing it for them. You know the reasons why you're doing it. So their opinions don't matter. Like people ask me all the time, like when I get shit on the internet, they're like, doesn't that piss you off? And it's like, yeah, there's a few people who have ever seen a back alley, I'm gonna punch them in the fucking ear. But at the same time, it's like, I don't care about those people. I don't do this for them. I wouldn't ask their advice, and their opinions don't fucking matter to me. While they're worried about me, I'm worrying about my lifters and what I'm doing and having fun and doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing and learning. And like, I'm not wasting time. I talked about attention being a finite piece. I'm not taking my attention and wasting it on them. I have a limited amount, and I'm going to use it to become the best coach that I could possibly become. Not concerning myself with a bunch of dweebs on the fucking internet. But this right here, this is culture, this is coaching. Everything needs to start from the inside out. And I know as coaches it gets difficult at times because you want to get clients and you want to do these things and show everybody how smart you are. But that's the what. Show people who you are and live it each day. Like I've done videos on what my why is, and I don't think anybody who knows me doesn't think I'm authentic to that reason, and that I don't live that why every single day or make choices towards that why because of that why every single day. I lead by example by doing this. I do the reflections. I share a lot of them with the group, even if they're private at times, because I think it's really important. And what it's allowed me to do with all of this too is I have some dark stuff from my past, but it's allowed me to take that and understand how that's molded my character and be able to extract positives from it. And because I've overcome that adversity, I can use my past and how I've overcome those adversities and the things that mattered and all of that stuff and help guide other people to develop those character traits. We live in a world of comfort. And I think for a long period of time within the human genome, threat was always present, right? That adrenaline was always there. There were always challenges. And now we live in a world where we're so comfortable there are never challenges. I think people really want to challenge themselves and they want to see what they're capable of. But I think we have a fear of other people's opinions. I think we have a fear of failure. And I think sports can kind of help people's true character and their true potential just really come out in other areas. Because it's one of those areas in our lives that we can actually feel challenged. We can even feel threatened at times, and we have to work on taking that threat and changing its context to making it more of a challenge idea in our mind. And when you start constructing your gym environment, right, your world is nothing more than just your conscious awareness giving that world context. And if you're constantly doing that in the gym, where you're battling those demons that are telling you can't do things, or you're incapable, or you're scared, or all of those things, and you're constantly changing the context of that environment, it's going to bleed into other environments within your life. So the second that you learn how to construct that small world in the gym, you can start consciously having that conscious awareness of being able to give context to the life outside of the gym in a way that makes life more enjoyable to live. And programs need, and coaches need to guide this process. So like one reason why I like max effort work, because it's gonna make you scared, and it's gonna piss you off and make you frustrated at times. And it's gonna force you to figure it the fuck out. And it's not necessarily about hitting the fucking weight. It's gonna really make you see your true character, and it's gonna force you to deal with it. So if you're one of those people who constantly gets frustrated, if you miss a lift, the more you miss, the more opportunity it is for growth. And I've seen it with a bunch of lifters. And like another thing that I think when you don't know your why, and I think I see this a lot, is people will do a meet and they'll cut a bunch of weight. So you've been competing in the gym with yourself at a given weight, in a given weight class. And then you cut a bunch of weight. And I think what this is you don't trust yourself. You don't believe in yourself. So you're giving yourself an excuse to not do well. There's your fear of failure. But because you've never really looked inside, I think a lot of times too, there's insecurity there. It's like, oh, if I lift these numbers at a lighter weight class, I seem stronger because I'm not comfortable with my strength numbers compared to everybody else's. And there's the fear of other people's opinions, right? So if you don't really know those reasons, you're going to constantly be spinning your wheels, making these poor choices. And as a coach, you need to identify these things. And you need to be able to have these conversations with your lifters to help them identify these things so that they can make the best choices for their journey. It's not about letting them do what they want. I think when coaches talk about individuality with programming and stuff, and yes, I do think that's important. And like one of the things, my volumes are the same for everybody. My program doesn't change to match your needs. It's if you can't handle the volumes and intensities I'm giving you, we need to figure out why. And yes, we'll pull back. I'm not trying to fucking hurt somebody. But we'll have conversations. Why can't you do this? And then you start realizing how stressed out they are in life. And then you start addressing those things. And then their work capacity starts increasing. It's not about starting them at a certain volume and then gradually improving it over time. Because if you're not, like I said, attention is finite. If they're spending a lot of their stress response on other things in their lives because of the way that they're framing that contextual experience of their environment, of their world as being super negative all the time or whatever it is, if you don't start addressing those, they can't handle more stress in the gym, no matter how much it follows physiological principles. Like the human being is at the center of this. And they're a complex fucking problem. And absolute performance is a complex problem. Getting a complex problem to achieve a complex problem it's in the literature, they call it a wicked problem. And I like the idea of that word because it really is. You're dealing with a human being, which is already a wicked problem, and then high level performance, which is already a wicked problem. It takes a lot of skill in order to get somebody to achieve their highest levels of potential. And it's one thing if you have a talented individual that can do it. As a coach, stop taking credit for that. Highlight the talent of your individual, highlight their work ethic, the things that they're doing well in the process-oriented framework. Don't be patting yourself on the back for your programming. It has nothing to fucking do with you. Literally nothing. You are literally not doing anything other than giving them a sheet of paper and hopefully being a mentor and a guide to their journey to help give them information that they don't have to be able to make the best decisions for them. And you should also be the one that's taking their losses at times. If they did everything right and they have a disappointing event, it's your job to shoulder that burden. Whether you're right or wrong, the coach takes the burden of that event. If somebody is doing the things that they're supposed to do. Of course, you hold them accountable if they're not. But in summary, you really got to start from the inside out. It's not about the program, and it's not about working from the outside in to make the program adjust to the individual. It's about the individual understanding who they are and you're building an environment, right? Like as humans, we're built to learn, and we're built to learn from our environment, from participating in our environment. And as a coach, you're building an environment that needs to have lessons for them to learn. And it needs to challenge them slightly beyond their current skill set. And they need to be aware of the affordances for action within their environment and the things that they can learn from them. So you're constructing an environment, and then the individual is going through this environment. It's not taking a program and then molding it to the individual. I think that's working backwards. It works backwards for how our species has made its way through this world forever. We've always learned from our environment. And of course, I'm not saying if you do that, you're wrong. Of course, it's going to yield results. Your training is going to yield results. But what we see on Instagram is we tend to see a lot of highly talented people who maybe necessarily aren't doing the right things, the right process-oriented things that the majority of us are going to need to do to get the most out of this sport, or to see our truest level of potential, and to learn all those lessons along the way. But you can follow along on Instagram. It's KW Canner Team Precision Powerlifting Systems. Stop it.